Okay guys, I was awoken by my Discord channel, a simple little message, C80. That's what I woke up to this morning. I awoke very happy. I'm gonna preface this and let you know, for the past couple years, 80% of the jobs I've been on here in LA, we have shot on Sony cameras. Sony has risen to the top, whether in the documentary world or the narrative world. Here, let Ben Affleck tell you about the rise of Sony cameras.
The Venice got really popular. All the rental house people I talk to say the Venice 2 is moving as fast as all the other cameras combined right now.
I love how Sony has really teamed up with cinematographers and filmmakers in designing new cameras.
So it's no joke, and the music video that I just got off of, one of the 3 projects I just wrapped this past month, shout out to Eric Richter, he watches the channel, director of a music video that I was just the DP on. We shot that on 2 FX6s and 1 FX9, pretty awesome, and I will put a link to that Harper music video down in the description below. I like Sony cameras, I'm a Sony user, I'm a Sony shooter, I'm a Sony owner. With that being said, I have always much preferred the color science and the skin tone rendering of the Canon EOS Cinema line. Back in 2020, I was the B-cam operator on a documentary. We were shooting on C500 Mark IIs. And if you remember 2020, that was the year the Komodo was launched, but that was also the year that the C70 was launched. Now, while I was away on that show, I had already paid my down deposit on the red Komodo. And I was really digging the color science of that C500 Mark II. While we're out on the road, boom, Canon launches the C70. My heart dropped. Oh man, I already paid a down deposit on the Komodo. Here we are, 4 years later, the C80. I absolutely love this. It solves all the issues. We now have an SDI port. We also now are full frame. Shout out to CVP. Look at these side by side. It is undeniable. Better dynamic range. The highlight roll off is better. The highlight rendering is better. Look at the skin tones. I've always thought this from day one. Sony's skin tones push magenta. They always have. Now they have gotten better in the past couple of years since the rollout of S-Cinetone. Skin tones have gotten better in the Sonys, but they still push red. Okay, I have to dial in. Right now I have one green in camera here on the FX30 to make up for the red push that all Sony sensors render skin tones. And also, now that we have a backside illuminated CMOS sensor in this new full frame sensor on the C80, look at the low light performance versus the FX6. Not only is the performance on the same plane, but because of the better highlight rendering that the C80 has, the highlights look better. There's more detail in those trees. This is amazing, guys. This is a no-brainer for me. The C80 will be in my newest and latest arsenal. And here's the thing. I was gearing up to grab an FX6. My wife and I have been working on a travel documentary that we started back in May. I have been shooting that on the FX30, funny enough, and I have the crazy 28 to 135 f4 servo zoom, and I thought, man, I gotta get an FS6 and make my life easier with the built-in internal NDs and the full frame and all of that. But now with the C80, it's a no-brainer. I'm ditching Sony, I'm going C80. The downside is it's gonna be a while till I get that camera in my hands. So I'm gonna have to continue to shoot the doc on the Sonys until this camera is fully released, right? Because everybody, I'm sure, has already pushed the back order back now at this point. What else is it in the C80 that is finally like, yes, this is the one to go for? And why I never really pulled the trigger on the C70. The biggest one is the HDMI only. You guys know I work a lot in the narrative world. Full-size HDMI breaks just as much as micro HDMI. Now, I don't mean like physically breaks, like the ports break, like how a micro HDMI does, but HDMI cables crap out all the time. I just wrapped on a short film, and we had to go through 3 HDMI cables in 1 day of shooting, right? HDMI cables are a dime a dozen. BNC cable, way more reliable, and also 12G now with this new SDI in the C80, so now you have 4K signals. With that being said, don't forget, because it's 12G SDI, you do have to follow SDI protocol. People want to blame it on Red that they started that with the Komodo, but it's been a thing since the Airy days, and it's because of the 12G versus the 3G SDI that the world has been used to. This full frame sensor is exciting. I'm super stoked about it. It allows for internal RAW versus a Sony FX that does not have internal RAW. You have to use an external monitor. Never been a fan, as a doc shooter, never been a fan of chunky, clunky external monitors. And we know the issues that the C70 flippy screen had. That's supposedly been fixed. They supposedly have a more rugged flippy screen now. They built that little lock in there. You know, that has to be still war tested, obviously. But here's the thing. If there's any Sony guys out there, specifically any Sony FX6 users out there that are going to trash the C70 screen, don't throw stones if you live in a glass house, right? Because the FX screen is pretty junk. Let's be honest here. It's not really usable in daylight. Everybody I know know that really uses FX6 cameras, the screen is kind of a pile of crap. So it will be exciting to see the maybe advancements they made with the C80 screen versus the C70 screen. To have full frame RAW is a no-brainer for me. Now, we still don't get open gate, apparently. I don't think there's open gate option right now available on the C80, but that's fine. You also can't do open gate with any Sony camera, at least not FX9 and down. Something else that I thought was a big bonus is now we have more mounting points on the bottom of the C80. That's nice for me. Cameras that don't have proper mounting on the bottoms, and you always get cages rotating, base plates rotating, all of that. So that problem has been cleared up, it looks like, from this shot from CVP's video. Now, something cool too that they implemented in the C80 is now they have a usable hot shoe, which is usable with all of Canon's microphones as well as these Tascam microphones. That's exciting. That is in direct competition to the FX3, FX6, FX9 line. We all know that. The weird thing is why didn't they implement a newer top handle that works with the new hot shoe interface? So maybe we'll see some other things come out with that. It would be really cool to have a handle, much like the FX6, where you can really have some controls of the camera on the top handle. That would be exciting to see, and I think it's totally doable now that we have this new hot shoe interface. Here in LA, a used FX6 goes for $5,500, or you could get a brand new C80 for $5,500, right? It's a no-brainer to me. Now, obviously, you're gonna have to pay the 10% California sales tax on top of that. If you have the boo card through B&H, then you don't have to pay sales tax, so that's kind of the bonus with B&H. So it's a no-brainer to me. I would definitely get a brand new C80 over a used FX6 any day of the week, and a lot of it is because of the internal RAW, the better color science, the better skin tones, a better looking dynamic range, in my opinion, a better highlight roll-off, in my opinion, right? It's just a no-brainer to me. When I was on the documentary, a big thing that I like about the Canon, when I was using the C500 Mark II, is they have an awesome like manual focus assist tool. So it's like a manual focus, autofocus kind of hybrid thing where the little triangles line up, and that's really, really nice when shooting documentary, when shooting anything really. However, I saw this on the B&H launch, and I'm sure some of you did as well. Check out what they're talking about, this new like rack focus, autofocus feature that the C80 has in its new sensor.
Manual tracking autofocus, and so it can be tracking one subject, and then you can, using the focus ring on your lens, rack that focus, and as it gets to another subject that's capable of being tracked, it will kind of take over for you and track that.
So the fact now that we have this backside illuminated sensor in the C80, that's why the autofocus is better. That's why the low light capability is better. I mean, let's be real. That's one of the reasons I believe that Sony autofocus has reigned supreme, because they started using BSI CMOS sensors years ago. Like I think back in 2015, they started using backside illuminated sensors. That's always going to be a better autofocus performance. So there are a few things, though, that I'm still a little on the sidelines when it comes to the C80. And that's to be war tested, right? With my own hands, right? Like I would like to see how the rolling shutter is of the C80. In the B&H launch, they did talk about how the rolling shutter has been improved. They had some horses running. We've seen a few things on CVP where, you know, the motorcycle stuff, but still we haven't seen a true rolling shutter test. I have not yet found a true rolling shutter readout, so it would be good to see how that compares, because, you know, the FX6 does kind of lead the race there in terms of this budget of cameras. So it would be nice to see the rolling shutter performance of the C80. They say it's been improved, but there was no like real evidence to prove that. The other kind of bummer for me is you are a little bit limited in terms of what frame rates you can shoot RAW in. So basically, if you need to do any sort of slow motion, you're going to have a cropped Super 35 image. So that is kind of a bit of a bummer, but obviously they can't cannibalize the C400 right out the gate, right? So that is a little bit of a compromise. You can only do full frame 4K high frame rates if you're in a non-RAW codec. So there is no option for a full frame slow-mo shot if you want to do RAW. That is a little bit of a bummer that could be hindering. However, there could be an interesting workaround to this. Let's say that you weren't concerned with 6K full frame RAW and you just were fine with 4K RAW, then maybe you could still use the speed booster from the C70. You still get the advantages of this newer sensor with the better autofocus, with the better low light capabilities, the triple ISO, right? You get that now, you get the speed booster, and you can still do the equivalent of full frame 4K RAW with the new sensor. I don't know, is that a thing? I think maybe I would try that out. To me, it would be worth it. I don't need to shoot anything 6K RAW. I just don't. I think it would be nice to maybe, drop down into the Super 35 mode, throw the speed booster on, and now we don't have to worry about it so much, and I can still take advantage of the newer sensor. The downside to that is that's going to hinder us to what lenses we can use. Obviously, you can't use RF lenses with a speed booster. This is the other kind of downside of Canon versus Sony. The Canon lenses are so much more expensive. This Dream lens, the 24 to 105 2.8, is a $3,000 lens. It's not anything close, in my opinion, to what the Sony 28 to 135 is. The only advantage of the 28 to 105 is that it is a stop faster, but that 28 to 135 is my workhorse Sony lens. It's been my workhorse Sony lens for the past 2 years. Even as big and clunky as it is, I use it on all cameras, FX6, FX3, FX30, A7S III. I love that 28 to 135. So you are going to pay more for RF lenses. That's one big, huge drawback. Another thing is in the gimbal world, right? If you want to throw the FX6 on a gimbal, everyone knows you lose that top handle, you lose audio for the camera. That's not going to work either. On one of my past videos, I talked about why I hate the fact that anytime you go into S&Q mode on a Sony camera, it kills the audio track. And someone was like, why would you want audio when you're shooting slow-mo? Well, to me, it makes a lot of sense as a documentary shooter. Anytime I shot slow-mo on the Red Komodo, or I call it overcrank, okay, it's an old school term, but I would shoot overcrank on the Komodo or any of my Blackmagic Pocket cinema cameras, I use that audio track. It's pretty simple, man. It's good to have that audio as just like ambience underneath. As a documentary one-man band run and gun shooter, I don't always have a sound guy with me running around, right? So I got to think any way I can to get some sort of ambience. Sometimes what I do too, I'll just wear my lav and let the lav pick up ambience. So I always have ambience rolling. That's something I had to do because I've been shooting on Sonys, right? And I just know, like, if I jump on S&Q mode, I'm going to lose any sort of ambience audio. So it doesn't make sense to me why people would even make that comment. Like, you always want audio, right? Like, why is that even a question? Like, so the fact that you lose that on an FX6 as soon as you throw it on a gimbal, that's kind of a huge bummer. Just another reason to go for that C80. You're not going to lose your internal audio. Plus, you have some amazing preamps in these Canon EOS Cinema Line cameras. On the documentary, again, I know it was a C500 Mark II, but still it is the EOS Cinema Line. The audio is so good. We didn't have an audio guy with us. We just had mic packs plugged directly into the camera, hanging off the back of the camera. We did the audio ourselves as the operators. The only thing I will admit as a negative, because I have been on jobs using the C70, shout out to Aaron Nardi out here in LA. My only real gripe about it using it in the field is it still has that kind of chunky DSLR body to it. It did remind me of the Pocket 4K. It has that weird wide kind of style body. It's not nearly as wide as a Blackmagic Pocket cinema camera, but it's still kind of chunky and wide. Now with the C80, I'm willing to overlook that. The way that I've been shooting with this travel dock, again, we did 11,000 miles in our first 2 months all over America. This travel dock we're working on, passion project of my wife and I. The C80 is a smaller form factor overall, and I do like that. And you can hold it close to you and shoot from the hip like I like to do with a cine saddle or something like that. So, I use the tiny saddle. It's even more discreet. I'm going super minimalist. I started going minimalist earlier this year, but I think it's a good day, a good day for documentary shooters. Even though I know that Sony kind of leads the market, I'm always wanting to find the best option for me and still make myself marketable, right? And for me, it really, ultimately, it comes down to that internal RAW and that color science. They've kind of given me a reason to say, well, look, now we have full frame. It's like, damn. There's no reason to live in the Sony world anymore. In my opinion, let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. I wish I could get my hands on the C80 for our travel dock right now, but I know I'm not gonna see this thing for a very long time. It's gonna be back ordered. I already know that, and we know that. We all know that. Unless they start getting them here in LA very, very shortly, because we're going to be back out on the road come October. So there's no way I'm going to get my hands on that C80 within this month. But if any of you do, I can't wait to see what you guys do with it, because that color science is, I just absolutely love the Canon color science. Thank you.